folks. In this lesson, we're going to be going over damage zones and updating Ruby's coding so that she takes damage as well as being able to have some degree of invulnerability after she takes that initial bit of damage. Okay, before we get too far, I want you to set one thing up as far as we had worked last time with something that added health. Set collectible health, click and drag that to your prefabs folder, okay, so that it is something that we can keep and we can reference later. So we want to make sure that our prefab is set up. Okay, one thing we're going to be doing with this is if we just spent a whole lesson working with our code to add health. In this case, all we have to do with decreasing health is look at sort of like how we set things up with our character, sort of with our game objects for increasing. So we just got to make some slight adjustments. But first, let's go ahead and check out what we're going to be using for it. So if I go to Assets, Art, Sprites, Environment, click and drag where it says Damage, Damageable, and just drag that to the hierarchy. I'm going to move it down then. Notice I have just that kind of Move tool selected. Okay. So if we think of collectibles having a couple of components, you've got a box collider and a script. Let's do, first of all, the easiest thing is let's add that box collider. So I'm right now in the damageable thing. Let's add a box collider 2D, and we're going to set it as a trigger because it's going to be making some code happen. Okay, we don't want it so that the user can't go in, so we're going to set it as a trigger. Oh, now what's the other thing we got to add? A script. We can't just well, you could add a script, but we have a folder for scripts. So let's go ahead and just say create C# script. And then this is going to be just called damage zone. You've heard of the auto zone. Well, it's time for the damage zone. Okay, damage zone. All right, I'm going to open up both the health collectible and the damage zone scripts. Just so that we can, because we're going to be basically copying and pasting initially. So go ahead and open up damage zone and health collectible. I'm using VS Code. You may use whatever you may use Notepad or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. Okay, so let's start off with damage zone. We're going to copy over this. Let's go to our health collectible, copy it. So I just did a Command A and then a Command C to copy. Or you can just do a right click and copy. And then we go ahead to this and let's paste over. First couple of things, we'll need to change the name to damage zone, okay? And we're gonna get rid of this debugger. It doesn't really matter if you get rid of this or not. It doesn't matter to me or to the game. But for our purposes, let's just get rid of it. And then we're going to keep most of all this other code. Let's also get rid of this if statement. We don't care if the user has less than, we just want to damage, okay? So we got rid of that line there. And then instead of change health, add 1, we're going to set it so that we get -1. Additionally, we don't want the object, like the damage object, to disappear once it's been hit. So let's get rid of that destroy game object. Now, the one thing that we're also going to adjust is this here where it says on trigger enter. So it's like we could have it so that once you touch the spikes or whatever, the hornet stuff, you take 1 damage. We want it so that if you stay in that damage zone, it's going to continue to drain your health. So we're going to go ahead and where it says on trigger enter, it's going to be set, we're going to change this to on trigger stay. Now what that does is it's going to continually drain health until the user exits that area. Okay, so what we'll do is that should be good, so we can save that. I just said file save, and let's give Unity a chance to update those scripts. And then what we'll do next is we're going to add our damage zone script to our damageable to the hornet zone. Okay, so we see we've got this good. All right, so let's check this out. So we go ahead here, we enter there, and where's our sort of our terminal or console as far as that? So immediately we get down to 0 health, like as soon as we enter. Okay, let's see if our pickup works though. Yay, we've got 1 hit point. Okay, so we need to make some adjustments so that like we don't lose all of our stuff in like a fraction of a second. And then also so that like if she's standing still in there, it's going to continuously update there. So let's go ahead to Ruby a second here, and we're going to go ahead to this to our sleeping mode. And what we're going to do is we're going to say never sleep. Okay, that's going to make it so that like while we're in that zone, the physics system is going to continually check to see exactly kind of like what's going on. Like, am I interacting with another box? Like, am I interacting with another object? All right. And let's also just push that, because remember Ruby's a prefab. Let's click on Apply All, just because we changed something. Nothing big, but we just want to keep things sort of good to go. Alrighty, so now we're going to add it so that like think of every game you ever played. Like after you get hit, you have like a couple of seconds of invulnerability or a few frames of invulnerability. We're going to add this through Ruby's code. All right, so let's go ahead to our project, and then we're going to be going to the Ruby controller. Alrighty, our good friend Ruby controller. Okay, so we are going to add a few things as far as our some variables, because we're going to be cooking into these things. So let's put them, I don't know, after current health. So I'm going to kind of clean things up here a little bit too. All right, so after current health, we're going to say here, bool is invincible. And I'm just going to, I have this written over here in my notes. I'm just going to put it over there. Okay, there we go. And then float invincible timer. And then we want to also say, I'm just going to keep all these all together. You should keep your public variables together. I'm going to keep them by function. It really doesn't matter. Okay, we added these. Let me zoom in here a second, because things are going to get a little wild here in a couple minutes. Okay, what are the things we just added? We added a Boolean value of is invincible. Boolean values are going to be either true or false. So we're going to be working with, as you see here, invincible timer and time invincible. We basically want to say, like, once we get hit, set is invincible to true. Is Ruby invincible after she gets hit? Yes, that is true. Otherwise, it's going to be set to false. And the time that she's going to be spent at invincible will be tracked by time invincible and invincible timer. So these three variables are going to be what we use to basically set it up so that Ruby is going to be set up so that when she takes a hit, she's invincible for a certain amount of time, and then it goes back to something where the normal functions of damage will work after the timer is up. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to skip down to the update function. Okay, so start is fine, update. All right, so we're going to be adding some things here. So within this update kind of bracket, so let's go ahead here. It's going to be below this thing here as far as our update. Okay, we're going to say if, and then let's do parenthesis, is invincible. All right, so if Ruby is invincible, so this is going to be every update. So this will be running, every sort of every time the game updates the sort of screen, sort of checks things. We're going to set this here. We're going to say, let's add an open bracket for is invincible. Okay, so I added a open bracket here and a closed bracket here. And we're going to say invincible timer. Now this is what's called a extended assignment operator. So we say minus equals time dot delta time. So this is basically saying, like, we're going to change the value of the invincible timer by how much time has passed. And then we're going to do an additional if statement. If invincible timer is less than 0, then we're going to set is invincible to false. Okay. So what is this doing? Okay, so this is saying every time the update function is called, which is called once per frame, we're going to decrease the invincible timer by how much time, so has passed between those frames. Once the invincible timer is less than 0, we're going to set the isInvincible flag to false. All right. So how do we get isInvincible set to true? And then also, how does isInvincible interact with taking damage? Let's go ahead and check this out. So we go ahead to our change health timer. And so before change health, oh good, thank you, Bells. So before change health, we had only used it so it would increase our health. Well, with our damage zone, we have something set so that we can now subtract health. And that's the function that's being referenced with our damage zone. So let's go ahead to change health. And we're going to basically set some code that's going to accommodate our damage zone. So we go ahead here to change health. And let's go ahead here. We're going to say if the amount is less than 0. So the amount is less than 0. If you hit a collectible, what number is being passed to change health? +1. This if statement won't execute. Okay. However, with damage zone, is -1 less than 0? Yes, it is. Okay. So let's go to our Ruby controller. So if amount is less than 0, and let's go ahead and set our bracket up. And if, whoops, why am I all caps here? Let's get that here. If is invincible, return. And then we're basically going to say is invincible equals true. And then we're going to set this here invincible timer is going to be set to time invincible. Let's make sure that looks good. Yep. Okay. Let's run through this code again. Okay, so we are basically saying initially we have 3 variables. Are you invincible? Yes or no, true or false. A timer, and then time invincible. So we go ahead here, think of a scenario like this, is that we start off, we're at 5 health. We step on a damage zone. So immediately, what's going to be called is, if we look at our damage zone, we see this will then be called. Controller.changeHealth will be past the parameter -1. Okay? So we go back to Ruby, we see here change health has just been given the amount of -1. So let's run through this then. If amount is less than 0, yes, that is true. If this is true, then execute the code between these brackets. If is invincible, return. In this case here, we are not invincible at this point. It's initially set so that we are not invincible. We're going to then say set is invincible is going to be set to true, okay? And then we're also going to set a timer. We don't want to be set, so we don't want to have infinite invincibility. Instead, we want it so that we want a specific amount of time to be invincible, which we set up here is going to be 2.0 seconds. Okay, we now go to our update function and we see every frame we check, are we invincible? If so, start decreasing that clock. Okay, so I'm going to just check my code here. Second is invincible equals true. It's invincible timer equals time invincible. Forgot a semicolon. Okay. True, good. Invincible, return, good. All right, that should be good. I'm going to save this and let's see. Hopefully I don't have to do any troubleshooting. That's always frustrating. Okay, so I'm back to Unity. Let's bring this over. Okay, code seems good. Excellent. Alrighty, last thing, so let's just test this code real quick. All right, so obviously we don't have, we have 5 health. Let's go to our console. And so immediately, you see how we're staying in there? 1, 2, 1, 2. So what's happening is, if we think of the script that's running, let's run this script again. So we enter. The flag has been now set that we are invincible. A timer is counting down 2 seconds. Every frame, that timer is going down and down and down and down. And then, of course, why is it set to 0 out of 5? That's because the other part of our script called the clamp is basically keeping an upper range and a bottom range as far as like what are our possibilities. Okay. Last thing we're going to do, which I think is kind of neat, with our let's go to our let's get out of play mode. There we are. Let's go to damageable. I find this to be very interesting. Let's make sure that we've got our rectangle tool set. And then let's go ahead to our sprite renderer. So where it says draw mode, set that to tiled. All right. And for tile mode, set it to adaptive. This is kind of neat. Now watch this. I click, I drag it, and watch this. Once we get to a certain point, it's going to create another tile. So you see how it's going to basically try to interpret the pattern of like what we are doing here, and we can just kind of just keep on dragging it. It's going to draw it. So it's kind of neat. I don't know. So that's what the last part of this lesson, just the way to make a ton of things. With our mesh type, we also need to set one thing. I might need to pause this a second. Yep, I'm going to pause it. I'll BRB. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so before we're just had our console up, go to project, and then go to environment, and then it's going to be here in the sprite settings for the sprite import settings. Set the mesh type to full rect, and that's going to sort of make it a little bit nicer when it comes to tiling your stuff. Okay. And there we go. So that's going to sort of like change how we do things, and I think for the better. Okay. All right, folks, that's it for this lesson. Pretty tough one. And then, is there something else? Yes, I also need to change the box collider too. All right, auto tiling set there. Apply. That will then set it so that it goes, if you're tiling something as far as this giant thing, we want it to be the box collider also expands as well. All right, big lesson, good stuff.